Acts chapter 20, starting in verse 1. And after the uproar had ceased, Paul sent for the disciples, and when he had exhorted them and taken his leave of them, he departed to go to Macedonia. And when he had gone through those districts and had given them much exhortation, he came to Greece. And there he spent 3 months, and when a plot was formed against him by the Jews as he was about to set sail for Syria, he determined to return through Macedonia. And he was accompanied by Sopater of Berea, the sons of Pyrrhus, and by Aristarchus, Secundus of the Thessalonians, and Gaius of Derbe, and Timothy, and Tychicus, and Trophimus of Asia. But these had gone on ahead and were waiting for us at Troas. And when we sailed from Philippi, after the days of unleavened bread, and came to them at Troas within 5 days, and there we stayed 7 days. Verse 7. And on the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread, Paul began talking to them, intending to depart the next day, and he prolonged his message until midnight. And there were many lamps in the upper room where we were gathered together. And there was a certain young man named Ectheus, sitting in the windowsill, sinking into a deep sleep. And as Paul kept on talking, he was overcome by sleep and fell down from the third floor, and he was picked up dead. But when Paul went down and fell upon him, and after embracing him, he said, "Do not be troubled, for his life is in him." And when he had gone back up and had broken the bread and eaten, he talked with them for a long while until daybreak, and so departed. And they took away the boy alive and were greatly comforted. Okay, that's probably more than enough. Okay, at the beginning, and after the uproar had ceased. So, what uproar? So we can recall that we had this riot in the Artemis Coliseum, if I can call it that, right? That area there where a bunch of people, actually the silversmith kind of started it, right? He was the guy that says, "You're making us lose our money because you're not letting us keep we're not making enough idols to make our money, so we need to get this Paul guy out of here. And his company is causing all the trouble, right?" So, and it just became bigger and bigger and bigger of an event of riot that several of them going, "What are we here for?" I don't even know why I'm upset, but I've been told I have to be upset here. That kind of a riot. Eventually, the magistrate settles the crowd down and dismisses everybody because there was no charge. There was nothing to bring. And that's what is after this, and after the uproar had ceased here. Okay. All right. So Paul had sent the disciples. In my translation, when he had exhorted him, exhorted.
Or encouraging on the ESV.
Right.
Encouraging that.
Encouraged. What does King James have?
Embrace.
Embrace. So you can kind of see the sense of that word and that phrase there. I always think it was like a coach in the locker room at halftime. It's that kind of giving that kind of a speech, an encouraging thing to say, "You guys are doing well. We can do better. Here's how we can." That kind of coaching, if I can call it that. And that's really kind of what Paul was all about for the discipleship, was coaching.
Well, they had come out of that situation they were just in too.
Right.
And so I'm sure there was some coaching, but some encouragement also.
That goes into that. Yeah. Exactly. It's one thing to have your leader or your person who's your pastor or something to keep telling you what needs to be done. But there are times when you just need a big old thanks, a big hug, if you will. Say, what you're doing good.
Yeah.
Right? You need that. Okay.
And also, we don't do that a whole lot in the church. we always point people to, and we always want to exhort people to get them to look to do better,
To do that.
right? But at the same time, often we don't look and see where people are and where they've come from to where they are. And like you said, a lot of times people need that encouragement, you know, and not that, I'm not gonna call it a beat down, but just a continuous, you know, well, we can do better. We can do better. Sometimes there's got to be a celebration of where we are, you know. And I think, especially in the church, we don't do that very well. We don't do that very often.
There's a lot of what I call just an unspoken expectation.
Yeah.
I'm just presuming on you to do this, you know, type of thing, as opposed to really thanking the individuals and wherever it may be. I mean, when's the last time you guys walked by the nursery and said, "Thanks, guys"?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
that kind of thing. Or, it's something for us to learn, and we apply it not just to our church life, but to everyday life. really.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever it might be.
Sometimes we do it better outside of the church than we do inside the church.
Yeah.
Because of that expectation.
Yeah.
You know, we expect people that are believers to be sacrificial, you know, and that's just a part of the Christian life, so why say thank you?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He exhorted them, and taking his leave of them, he departed to go to Macedonia. All right, I will be the first to admit my European geography is not stuck in my head on where, you know, where places are at. I'm not saying I do much better in the city of Mandeville, but Macedonia, it sounds like one of those old Bible names, for sure. So where is Macedonia? How do you place that in your head?
Northern Greece.
Northern Greece?
Yep.
Okay. Where's Greece?
Way over there.
Across the sea from
West of the
Israel.
Holy Land.
West of the Holy, where's the
The
Holy
Holy
Land?
Land and Israel.
North,
Italy,
North
sorry.
Mediterranean.
Yeah.
All right. Where would be modern day today? Got Greece?
That's, actually, Macedonia's still there. Northern Greece is what it is. It's a province.
Right.
It really is. It's like a separate entity.
Okay.
Here it is, right here.
Serbia?
There you go.
They're always flip back. So, yeah, so it's in that European area there that, if you really don't know the area very well, there's a lot there. It's like your brain sometimes is limited to the geography that you know in your head, right? It's much more than just our world is more than just our Mandeville. It's more than just our Louisiana or United States. It's massive, and that area is, while it's strange and foreign to me, it was the center of a lot of things that went on that we today don't realize. It was evolved from that area. The Greeks, the Romans. I mean, we got our medicines from the Greeks. We got our laws from the Romans. We got a lot of stuff from that area here. So this is an important area. So as I say that, why then is Paul wanting to go to that area?
Because you were Gentiles that needed
Okay.
to know the message.
But that would be true for if he decided to go to Africa
Yeah.
or where else. Why is Macedonia always seem to be where Paul wants to head to? Where?
Well, it was
It's
a
the
center
doorway
of
to what?
thinking for so many centuries. Greece especially.
Okay.
And that evolved over to Roman. And that was the center of intelligent, I use that word, thought.
And sometimes if he was going to a certain place and another place was on the way, he'd stop. And if it was a lot of trade or some traffic or whatever, he felt that his journeys were going to take him. Like sometimes it was planned. Well, I'm going back to Jerusalem, and on the way, I'll stop over here. If the Spirit let me.
I would imagine there's a lot of transient people that go to Macedonia, just because it's such a hub, that he probably felt like it was the best way to get his message out, spread his message to a wider area, because people would then travel
Travel from
take his
there.
message.
It's the same thing like Rome, right? Why did Paul want to go to Rome? Because it was a place of influence. It's a place where he knew that there was a lot of opportunity, but also, like Jay was saying, a lot of opportunity for the word to spread from that point also. And Greece was the Rome before Rome.
Right, yeah,
Right.
right.
I mean, with Alexander the Great, and he conquered part of what was the the known world at that time. So it was still a great place of influence.
Plus geographically, you had a lot of ports, and they traveled
Yeah,
all by
exactly.
sea. I'm looking at it, it's not, but you can see his journeys,
Yeah,
and if you notice, it's all on the coastline.
yeah.
So it's gotta be for transportation also. Because he went to Thrace and Asia Minor and all that, so it's all ports. He stayed around the whole Aegean Sea, so it's gotta be transportation also.
And the other reason might be follow up places where he'd been.
And there was follow-ups, right? Yep. Yep. Okay. All right. And when he had gone through those districts, is that districts the same word you guys have?
Yeah.
Okay. And had given them much exhortation, he came to Greece. And there he spent 3 months. Plenty of time to have a plot made. That's the way we're looking at that. So, I guess I should ask the question, why is there a plot for Paul and company?
Some reason there's always a plot against them.
Yeah.
I mean, he disturbs the balance of what they've got going on with their power structure and their wealth structure and within the church.
But his reputation preceded it. There was a number of times when, and I don't recall specifically, where they say the Jews followed him and disrupted the people. So I wouldn't be surprised if he had spies, whatever phrase you want to use, that traveled with him or went ahead, or if nothing else, messages were sent saying, watch this guy, he's on our hit list. And his poster was up in the proverbial Jewish post office. You know, I really do, because he has such a reputation through there.
So, are they in a Jewish area?
You have Hellenistic Jews.
Yeah, well, the short answer is yes,
Yes.
but not a traditional Jewish enclave, but you have synagogues,
Right.
Yeah,
and
they're
that's where do you go
Hellenistic-
first?
They're
You go to a
Hellenistic
place.
Jews, yep.
And it's like they're trying to discredit him as he's leaving rather than while he's there. So it's easier to tarnish somebody's name after the fact when they're not there to defend themselves.
And what would motivate these Jews to do this?
Paul was teaching against the law.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
And so they felt self-ascribed
Just like Paul did when before he was a believer.
to defend the law, if
That's
you will?
right. That's what it was all about.
People also want to build up their own, hey, I'm the one that routed him out. You know, I'm the one that
Chased them away or whatever.
try to get a higher, work their way up the hierarchy in their system.
I have a hard time wrapping my head around the motives, the whys. I mean, besides what we, touched on.
Financially too, though,
Yeah.
because money's everything, even today. I mean, I think people, of course, they put money ahead of God in their thoughts. That's probably back then too. I mean, money's everything. I mean, that I've seen.
It's almost like their motivation, while slightly different, was the same as the motivation of the silversmith and everything else, right? Same as the motivation of when Paul would go in and upset the Gentiles and
The
their
woman that was
beliefs,
the prophet, the
right?
seer.
For profit and position and everything else, and a lot of the Jews that would rise up, they weren't the normal people, but they were the officials, the Jewish officials that would get upset because their positions were being threatened. Their way of life was being threatened.
Does that,
I was just gonna say, it's interesting, I don't know if you're about to get into it though, but that when he was about to go to Syria and they formed this plot against him, he went back through the area he had just come through, I guess to reestablish who he truly was.
Or a known safe route.
Yeah.
Do we have today groups of people who try to, what do I want to say, not undo, distort the Christian message?
100%.
On both sides of it. You got very legalistic Christians, so we always want to look to the,
Yes.
the liberal. You got the legalistic that's putting law and grace, and ain't preaching.
And
And that's a problem.
And there are those, what do I want to call them, overt Christians, the way beyond evangelical, snake handlers, the instant wealth if you believe in God because God meant for you to be wealthy, the name it and claim it.
Yes, prosperity.
Prosperity, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm fishing with my pole trying to find that word.
And that's the one everybody goes to.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I despise it. But then you've got the very legalistic
Yeah.
Christian, and they doubt your salvation because, oh, you did this. Well, did you ever look in the mirror
Yeah.
and see what's going on in your life? I mean, we have to understand Christians are not. Christ has overcome sin. We're still going to flesh it out. So we're going to make mistakes. So there's got to be a balance, and I think that's the problem. I was there for years. I was the Christian police,
Mhm.
and that's wrong. I don't know what you're dealing with. And that's the problem. I mean, in everyday life, when we're dealing with people on a daily basis with relationships, sometimes, I love what Mickey said, we don't do enough building relationships outside Sunday morning. Get to know people, see what they're going through.
Right.
We got to be careful of that.
Paul, a lot of times got these new places with Gentiles that didn't have any background like the Jews had, and they came out of paganism. And Paul sometimes wasn't there long. They didn't have scriptures up. He loved to say, okay, well, let's see, they just got what they got. That's what happened all night sometimes, because he's not going to be that long. He's trying to give them as much as he could.
Yeah, read Corinthians. I mean, if you think, this is what gets me. When I get on my high horse and think, well, I'm judging people, read Corinthians and what that early church was going through. Because we got to remember, the New Testament was not written back then. All they had was the Old Testament revealing the Messiah.
Yeah.
So they had to build upon that. And you read that book of Corinthians, it'll make your head spin with some of the things that was going on.
And then some of these Gentiles didn't even have those books, because they didn't know them.
That's right.
Because that wasn't there.
That's
that wasn't to them. Yeah.
So,
So Paul comes to an area where in that visit where he presents it, and a lot of them believe.
right.
But then they're just little babes,
You're right. Good point, Frank.
I think the paganism also was a very, or at least in my mind, I kind of sweep it aside. It's like, oh yeah, that's what the other people did. But it was an active thing. I mean, they recruited, they were hardcore, whatever they were, and they wanted to get more people in.
Yeah.
Whether it be, hey, let's go to the Temple of Virgin so we can go, and so there was this competition for everybody.
Right.
It wasn't just a casual thing, this is what you did and you didn't do something else.
Yeah.
And that's, you don't hear a lot about that, of how hard these other pagans, and the Jews were fine to say, you're just not one of us, so you go do whatever you want. We're going to do this as Jews. And you don't hear much about the battle between God and pagans. You do it here, but historically. But if you go to Greece and these other places where they have the temple of this, the temple of that, the temple of this, the temple of whatever, and read a little bit about what they did, it was a I don't know what you want to call it, food court of religions.
It kind of goes what he was saying, though. If you think what you're saying is correct. If you look at today's church, you kind of got the both ends. You've got the very legalistic, which the pagans were. If I do this, my God will help me.
Right,
He's my God. Then you had they lived in lasciviousness and money and greed. So today's church has kind of got, if you go to the extremes, they got both. And that's when it gives us a bad name by living by faith. And I never thought about that. You were explaining that. Today's church, what we say is the worst root of bad things is both ends of the spectrum is what I'm saying. Paganism, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Okay. In verse 4, then he gets this set of hard names. And
You don't hear these guys elsewhere, at least I don't recall them anyway.
Yeah.
Well, Gaius.
Gaius and Timothy, yeah, but
Yeah, Gaius, John actually writes one of the later letters to Gaius,
Right.
which I'm assuming is the same guy, but
you don't hear the other 4 or 5 that I
no,
can't pronounce.
it's because their names are too hard.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. It's hard to write it out, yeah.
God, spell
He didn't have spell check, yeah.
It tells you where they're from too.
it. Yeah,
And I think that's important.
You know, we're familiar with the 12 disciples and stuff, and Peter and them, but they were mainly ministering to the house of Israel. These are giving us some names of some of the people that were helping Paul and what he was doing. Yeah,
So it's a good reminder, this isn't just the Paul show, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No effective ministry is by one person,
Right.
right?
But the thing with Paul is that all of a sudden, these are mysteries that were hidden for generations that now has been revealed to Paul. And so Paul sometimes refers to it as his gospel because it was given to him, but it's really, he's saying this is what God told me. This is what I got from God. I didn't get this from the other apostles. And so Peter and everyone, when he started writing his letters, are looking at him saying, wow,
But also notice they're all from different areas.
Yep.
They're not just from one town. I don't know if that's significant or not, but it's
The last guy, trophy guy, Trophimus, of, mine has Asia. If the last I recall in my geography, Asia was not just a little city, right? Right. I mean,
but biblically, it wasn't what we call Asia now.
That's Turkey, actually.
It's just the Turkey area.
the Asia
It didn't
Minor.
go
That's
all the way
Asia
to,
Minor.
was it the Pacific?
Yeah.
Do I recall right that Paul wanted to go to Asia Minor early on in his ministry, but kind of got
Yeah,
rerouted?
repositioned. Yeah.
Yep, that's
to
what
get
he
delayed,
yes.
so, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But somehow someone from Asia has come to him. Interesting thing there.
in some of these little congregations, he never was there before that formed, and he's wanting to get there because he hasn't been there to see him. But some of the people he led to the Lord then started things in their areas, and so some places Paul hasn't been.
Well, you got to remember Pentecost too. When the crowds left, I
They
mean, they
left
went all
all
over
over.
the region.
Right.
So and that's what spread
And
the
then when he
gospel.
was in prison, those Roman
Yeah.
soldiers were tied to him, and then they
Yeah.
got reassigned somewhere, and they were believers.
It was just, it's funny. It's just by chance. And the Pentecost is when the Holy Spirit was given out, and they went back to all over the world. Just
Just by
coincidence.
coincidence, yeah. The one thing of these 5 verses, to me, the center is about the 3 months, way back in the middle here, it talks about. And the reason why I'm thinking about that is because this isn't I've come to get you baptized, boom, I'm out of here. But you start developing real relationships and real connections when you spend the time. And it does take time to make real connections with individuals. It's not just, a 30-minute moment at church on Sunday is your connection. There's more to it than that.
That's a great point, Howard, is that it's not like they were there for 3 months, so let me see, that's 3 months, that's 12 Sundays, he preached 12. No, this was a daily interaction with people for
Fellowship.
3 months. Yeah.
And obviously, what an hour at a time, he spent literally through the night talking.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that next
One day.
week, the poor guy. He lives in infamy.
Don't preach too long.
There's a,
So let the pastor read this one.
It reminds me of the whole thing when when they started Secret Church, right? I don't know if you guys were familiar with Secret Church, they used to have it here.
Yeah.
But part of the reason behind it was that when they would go to preach in Asia, most of the time they would disciple pastors and things where they had to meet in secret to to be instructed, or else they'd be arrested.
Right.
So they would have sessions that would last for 12 hours. They would teach for 12 hours. And so they had what they called Secret Church that developed after that, which was an extended discipleship that would go on for 6 hours. But it was a neat experience, but that's kind of where that whole thing came out of it. You're only going to be there for a short amount of time, So you gotta get out the maximum amount of information, you know, into the people's hearts and
That's right.
hands as you can.
All right. So, I don't really want to get, we won't do this next session any justice if we try to cram it in less than 5 minutes. So we're going to stop here. I guess the question I have is, out of these 5 verses, what does it say to you? What does it apply to you? I believe firmly that all Scripture is inspired and breathed by God, and is good for correction, training in righteousness. So, Luke wrote these things, and by the way, we're going to find out that Luke was involved in this here. He didn't mention his name, but he does in a couple verses next. He will mention himself.
Well, in verse 5 he says us.
Yeah, he says, yeah, us and we.
Right,
Us and for us, yeah.
right. And those are the key words to be looking for that. But anyways, what does it apply to you? I mean,
Well, I think you kind of touched on it. It's, one is relationship, build relationships. But it doesn't say, you know, they backed themselves in the corner and fought valiantly against the Jews or whoever that were kicking them out. I call it opportunistic. They kind of like the secret church. You made the opportunity to do it, and then you got out of Dodge, or you moved on. But it's the relationships, you find the opportunities where you're allowed to talk about it or preach or whatever you want to call it. Use it, maximize it, build relationships, go on, and then it doesn't really apply here when we talk about it. Go back and encourage that individual later. And we have opportunities. I mean, there's some things we can't do in our society now at work, especially, you know, proselytize or whatever you want to call it at work. But there's things you can do. Find what you can do and do
it almost sounds like you're implying there's an action plan.
it.
There's
Proactivity.
Being proactive, as opposed to just letting it happen.
Yes.
That the walk in our lives is more than just things just come and go.
As some people call it, being intentional.
Yes, intentional, that's the word I'm looking for, yeah.
Yeah, Paul used to go to the point of, when he would exhort Timothy, he would tell Timothy, don't get involved in other things. Our job is to promote the gospel. Right. Don't get involved in, controversy or
side issues,
genealogies. And he said, don't bother yourself with that. Your intent, he was so much just intent in just pushing the gospel forward, getting it out as much as possible. And I think that's why Paul, outside of a couple of places, didn't stay in a place very long, because he knew his job was just to get that word out to as many people as possible, and also that he understood that it wasn't just him speaking, but it was what the Holy Spirit was going to do with those words. So he would get it out, allow those seeds to be sown, and then allow the Holy Spirit to
it seems like
start working.
if he got somewhere and there wasn't as much opposition, he'd stay longer. When the opposition got real bad and the conditions got where, okay, time to move. So some places he could stay longer than others, and then he'd try to find qualified people that would, from there, or something to carry on the work, and then we'll come back through and see how they're doing. I'll send a letter, let's see how things are going, how they took my word.
That's a great point, Frank. You noticed that when he would, because he was so wanting to promote the gospel and not having to sit there and defend.
Right.
Paul's thing was not about defending. Paul's thing was about presenting.
Yeah.
If you don't want to hear it, I'll move on. But here's the message. Receive it. Allow the Holy Spirit to work.
Yeah.
If you get too much pushback on it, hey, dust off your feet. Move on to the next
And I
place.
think it's interesting, we're talking about a plan, being proactive,
Right.
and not shying away from the message, I'll say it that way.
Yes.
But he also said, I agree with you, avoid the other stuff.
Don't get in arguments.
Yeah.
That's arguments
So,
aren't.
in today's society, you can say, well, get away from the immersion versus sprinkling baptism. Get away from
The controversies.
the
That's right.
controversial stuff.
Yes.
And talk about the main thing, Jesus,
Right.
the gospel.
But I don't think he was ever shy about confronting the
Oh, no.
Jews about, especially the Jews.
Yeah.
I think he was
Because
more
he knew
confrontational with the Jews than he was with
a Jew.
the
He was
Gentiles, because You know, he got more pushback from the Jews too because of, you know.
Well, they should know better, as he was, you know.
Right.
his-
Right. They,
He knew what they knew.
yeah.
It says right here, here's the prophecy,
Yeah.
you know.
So certainly Paul wasn't looking for the next retirement home to
No.
Yeah, no.
place to retire at, so.
How old was he when he died?
He was looking for a place to die, is what Paul was looking for.
Yeah.
He lived, what was his age? It was older, wasn't it? When he died.
I don't know, the older I get is,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
that
it's older in
scale
those
changes.
times, and that's part of what I was, you know,
Yeah,
Right.
he was past retirement age, that's my point. He could have retired. He didn't, he pushed it.
okay. All right, we need to stop here. What are you guys praying for?